Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak, she exposed. A slush fund hidden in plain sight, a vote that sold out the public, and a secret meeting with power brokers that shattered Green's defense. 5 days later, the noise has turned to silence, and the silence feels like judgment. Will Green fight back or fall for good? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing started under a heavy silence, the kind that makes even clocks hold back. Something felt wrong. Nobody said it, but everyone sensed it. The room wasn't noisy or wild. It was controlled. Too controlled, like a fuse had already been lit, but no one could see the spark yet. Assistants typed slower. Reporters checked their cameras twice. One whispered, "This one's going to be boring," and another replied, "Same circus, different clown." But they were dead wrong. Jasmine Crockett entered like the air itself belonged to her. Calm, steady. Every step cracked the illusion of normal. She wasn't there for drama. She came with surgical precision. No flashy team, no grand stagecraft, just her and a slim black folder that looked dangerous. She didn't scan the room. She didn't need to. Every eye was already locked on her. From the press gallery to the aides' seats, people thought this was routine. Another empty hearing, another round of staged outrage. Cameras rolled lazily. Laptops clicked without urgency. No one saw the storm. But Jasmine had brought it in with her, and the storm, it was zipped inside that folder. The session hadn't even started when Jasmine leaned forward, tapped the mic, and said calmly, "Before we begin, I have a statement." Her voice wasn't loud, but it froze the chamber. Staffers stopped mid-keystroke. Reporters jerked their heads up. Something in her tone warned of trouble. Marjorie Taylor Greene barely looked up at first, flipping a page. But then Jasmine lifted a sheet of paper and said, "This document shows a $130,000 transfer from Congresswoman Greene's campaign funds to a company that does not exist." She held up a printed bank slip dated April 14, 2024. The recipient, North Star Strategy. The address, Suite 701, Liberty Plaza, Washington, D.C. Then Jasmine paused. "This address isn't in any corporate registry, real estate record, or business license database. No executives, no tax ID, no phone, nothing. No office, no phone, no employees," she repeated sharper this time. Green's head snapped up. A staffer dropped a pen. The air thickened. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't need to. "This is slander," Green shouted, rising halfway from her seat. Reporters scrambled to zoom in. Jasmine stayed calm. She slid another paper across the desk, a bank record showing the money came straight from Green for Congress. Not once, but twice, $80,000 on March 22nd and $50,000 on April 14th. Jasmine locked eyes with the committee. "This isn't slander," she said. "It's math." The silence deepened. The pages carried confirmation numbers, routing codes, timestamps. Real money, real dates, real intent. Green slammed her palm on the desk. "This is a damn witch hunt," but Jasmine didn't flinch. "You can cry witch all you want," she said quietly. "This isn't Salem. This is Congress, and I have the receipts." Her words cut like glass. Then she opened the folder again. This time she laid out expense filings from Green's own campaign, the same $130,000 listed as strategic communication services. No details, no invoices, no names, just a disappearing act on paper. Every page added weight, a fake company, direct campaign transfers, hollow explanations. Jasmine placed them down like parts of a bomb no one could stop. Green opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. The shouting wasn't needed. The evidence spoke for itself. And Jasmine. She still hadn't raised her voice. But then she went further. She reached into the folder once more and pulled out something sharper than numbers motive. This next document, Jasmine said calm as ever, details a 4-day luxury trip to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, paid entirely by campaign funds, filed as constituent outreach. She didn't pause. No record of a public event, no forum, no speech, not even a Facebook post. But there is a $2,300 charge for a lakefront villa, $150 for a luxury spa, and $6,700 in jet rental fees. Heads turned. Staffers scribbled faster. Green shifted in her seat, jaw tight. Jasmine pressed on, flipping another page. The itinerary shows dinner at a five-star restaurant 2 hours from the nearest town hall. Room service included Wagyu beef, beluga caviar, and 4 bottles of vintage Cabernet, $800 each. She paused. It's tough to talk to voters when you're in a hot tub 3 states away. The silence cracked. This time it cracked toward Green. The congresswoman leaned forward, her glare sharpening. Jasmine didn't even look at her. Instead, she pulled out a small black voice recorder and placed it gently on the desk. Her words dropped like a hammer. Now I'll read from 2 phone calls, both made by a Green staffer. The room stiffened. Cameras refocused. Jasmine tapped the recorder. These were recorded legally with a cooperating witness, both tied directly to the campaign transfers. She cleared her throat once. Call 1, April 5th, 2024, 2:17 p.m. Staffer says, we can't send it straight from the campaign account. It has to go through the action committee first. She looked up. The chamber held its breath. Recipient replies, and then it moves to Chase, same account as her sister's condo fund. A gasp broke through the gallery. A lawyer scribbled furiously. Green's lips parted, but no words followed. Jasmine turned to the second page of the transcript. Call 2, April 19th. Same staffer, different tone. They said just market consulting. Nobody checks that line anyway. The effect was instant. A Republican lawmaker shifted in their chair. A woman in the gallery whispered, "Oh my God," before being hushed. Jasmine didn't stop, didn't look up. She let the words hang in the air like smoke in a sealed room. That's when Green shot up from her seat. Her voice shook with anger. You don't know the context of those calls. Jasmine stayed seated, hands flat on the table. Her voice never rose. I know what the bank knows, she said, and I know what the receipts show. For a long beat, nobody moved, nobody spoke. It wasn't silence anymore, it was exposure. And for the first time, Green didn't look angry. She looked trapped. If the recordings had drawn blood, what came next cut deeper, not louder but sharper. Jasmine still didn't raise her voice. She pulled out one sheet of paper and slid it across the table, like laying down a winning card. The account those funds went to, she said steadily, belongs to one person, Congresswoman Green's brother-in-law. The room shifted. Some stared, some froze. All listened. His name is Eric C. Maddox, she continued. He's listed as an officer of a Georgia company, Patriot Ridge Holdings. She held up the official registration, stamped with the state seal, recent and clear. This is not a fake company. It exists, but its stated purpose is real estate investment. Her finger tapped the line. Not consulting, not campaign services, nothing tied to congressional work. No objections came, only the weight of truth settling in. Jasmine reached into her folder again this time, pulling out a thick manila envelope marked Confidential Internal Review, 2023. She opened it slowly and said, inside is a suppressed financial report. Opened last August, buried by January. Her voice was exact. It names Mr. Maddox as a high-risk intermediary in a bank fraud scheme. 3 flagged accounts, padded wire invoices, false business labels. Someone in the room gasped. Jasmine set the file down in front of the chairwoman. This report was never followed up. It was flagged, then buried. She paused. Until now. The chamber didn't gasp. It froze. Even the walls seemed to wait for someone to move, but no one dared. No phones buzzed, no papers shuffled. Green sat stiff, jaw clenched, knuckles white. It wasn't Jasmine's volume that carried weight. It was what she refused to let vanish. The moment hung heavy, Maddox's name still echoing. But Jasmine wasn't finished. Not close. She pulled out another set of papers and the air thickened again. This wasn't the bottom. It was just another layer revealed. Jasmine straightened a slim binder, opened it with care, and slid the first page under the overhead camera. These are private flight records, she said. Her voice was calm, sharp, precise. Flights from Washington, D.C. to Scottsdale, Arizona, booked under versions of the name M. Green or through Shell booking services. She turned the page. The aircraft Bombardier Challenger 300, charter cost $16,200 per trip. Total flights 5, between May and September last year. Nobody interrupted. By now, the room understood every line from Jasmine mattered. These flights, she continued, weren't paid for by Green's campaign. Not her personal account either. They were covered by Philip Granger, a private investor under federal investigation for securities fraud, bribery, and secret lobbying. She looked up. He's not just a donor, he's a fixer. His name appears on 6 campaign hospitality filings, but not these flights. She placed another sheet under the camera, an invoice from a Nevada charter service signed and showing Granger's company as the payer. This is direct, she said. Wire confirmation included. And here, flipping again, is a bank record showing Granger's firm reimbursing one of Green's staffers for airport rides in Scottsdale, filed as staff education expenses. Tension rolled across the room. A lawmaker leaned closer to the screen. Another typed quietly on their phone. Jasmine never broke pace. I also submit hotel invoices, she said, tapping 3 highlighted pages. All stays at the Fairmont Scottsdale Princess, a luxury resort tied to Granger's lobbying retreats. She looked toward the gallery. 3 weekends. Same resort. Same guest. She paused. Average nightly rate $1, $100. Presidential suite. Full spa access. No campaign events. No disclosures to the ethics committee. She let the documents settle before speaking again. Lobbyist paid lodging is a violation, she said, her tone like ice, and hiding it. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. That's when Green finally cracked. She shoved her chair back and stood, her voice cutting across the marble chamber like a gunshot. This is garbage. I'm being attacked because I won't play your DC games. Her eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone to back her up. No one did. Jasmine didn't even glance at her. Her focus stayed on the papers. She picked up the next sheet slowly, as if Green's shouting wasn't even there. Her voice stayed calm. No one's playing, she said. These are your documents. The words hit heavier than Green's outburst, quiet but final, like a gavel strike. The chairwoman lifted her gavel and slammed it once. Order, she said. Congresswoman Green, sit down. But Green stayed on her feet, shaking her head, fists tight at her sides. I've done nothing wrong. They're twisting everything. Her voice cracked, not just from shouting, but from somewhere deeper where control had slipped away. Still, Jasmine didn't move. She flipped to the last page, a room service bill. $470 for one night. Wagyu tartare. 2 bottles of Bordeaux. A wellness massage add-on booked under a code name that matched a Green staffer. And this, Jasmine added, was charged while Mr. Granger's retreat was happening 2 floors below. Now, it wasn't just about luxury. It was about being there, about patterns, about influence hiding behind leisure. By then, Green had sat back down, but her composure was gone. Her fingers tapped nervously on the desk. Her lawyer, 2 rows back, leaned forward, lips pressed tight. Reporters hammered at their keyboards. Someone from the Ethics Council whispered to a colleague, pointing at the Scottsdale flight log. Jasmine paused for the first time, not to rest, but to let it sink in. Outside, the world kept spinning, but in that chamber, everything was locked inside the weight of the papers on the desk. Jasmine didn't need to accuse or explain. She just kept showing what was already there. And in a room full of microphones, the loudest sound was paper. By now, no one gasped. They had stopped reacting. Jasmine wasn't just telling a story anymore. She wasn't just connecting dots. She was cutting straight through the timeline like a scalpel. Every page she set down felt like a wall cracking, and the next one, it didn't just smell of money, it stank of oil. Jasmine held up a calendar highlighted and initialed. This shows 3 meetings between Congresswoman Green and Clayton Drew, CEO of Ascent Energy Group, she said. The second his name hit the air, the room shifted. Committee members leaned in. Phones went dark. All 3 meetings happened within 10 days of Green's vote against the Clean Waters Protection Act. Jasmine continued. On record, they're listed as private consultations. Her eyes moved across the room, watching faces. But there's no transcript, no public record, no press, no notes, no travel logs. Then came the drop. Jasmine set the calendar aside and picked up a photograph, flipping it with 2 fingers before sliding it under the overhead camera. Here's where they actually met. The image filled the projection screen like a slap. Green and Clayton Drew, both in white resort robes, lying back on pool chairs, a silver ice bucket between them, champagne in hand. It looked like a luxury ad, but the timing made it explosive. This photo was deleted from the resort's social media within 48 hours, Jasmine said flatly. But metadata doesn't lie. Taken 4 days after the vote, time-stamped, GPS verified. She didn't need to punch the line. It landed by itself like glass shattering. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Jesus!" Chairs shifted. A senior staffer covered his mouth, leaning back slowly, blinking like he couldn't unsee the screen. The chairwoman leaned forward, pulled by gravity itself. Every device in the room, phones, tablets, projection screens, showed the same image: bathrobes, champagne, and a CEO with 12 bills hanging in legislative limbo. Jasmine didn't let the silence stretch. She flipped to the next page like she was reading out a criminal log. Clayton Drew is a registered lobbyist under Section 3B, she said. His company has 12 open contracts pending federal and state review, all tied to water access exemptions. She tapped the photo once. The vote Congresswoman Green cast blocked stronger rules on pipeline runoff in poor rural areas. 4 days later, she was here at this resort on a luxury weekend paid for by the man who stood to gain the most. Another page dropped. This meeting was never reported. Not to the public, not to this committee, not even to her own staff. Those last 8 words sucked the air out of the room. No shouting this time. No outbursts. Just stunned, frozen silence. Jasmine let the pause sit like a surgeon who knows the cut has gone deep enough. Then she added with the sharpest line of all, "And this photo wasn't saved. It was deleted. That only happens when someone's scared of what it shows." Green didn't fire back. She didn't insult. She didn't deny. She just went quiet. But her body betrayed her stiff shoulders, clenched jaw, eyes finally dropping to the folder as if wishing it was empty. It wasn't, and neither was the room. Now it was full of people seeing what they were never meant to see. The silence after the poolside photo didn't fade. It hung there heavy like smoke after an explosion. But Green didn't fold. She did what people do when they're cornered. She lashed out. Green shoved her chair back, rising so hard paper scattered. Her voice cracked through the chamber like glass shattering. "This is a damn witch hunt," she snapped, face, red eyes, frantic. "You don't care about facts, you care about headlines?" She jabbed her finger toward Jasmine, though she wasn't really looking at her. She was yelling into the air, trying to drown out something louder than her own words. "I've given everything to my district. This isn't oversight. This is theater." Her hands shook, but she kept going faster and harsher. "You want a villain, and I'm the easy target." The gavel didn't strike. No one cut her off, because everyone in the chamber, left or right, knew what they were seeing. This wasn't strength. This was collapse. Jasmine stayed seated, calm, unmoving. She opened the next folder slowly, like unsealing a confession. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Then explain this," she said softly, sliding a neat stack of papers forward. The screen lit up again, a Georgia State Certificate of Incorporation. 2 weeks after voting against tenant protection reform, you registered a limited liability company, G3 Consulting. Green froze. Her hand stopped mid-motion. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Jasmine turned the page, 3 entries highlighted. "This company received 3 direct payments from political funding groups," she said, totaling $92,000, all within 6 days of that vote. She tapped the dates with her pen. March 3rd, March 5th, March 8th. Next page, a blank invoice template. No services, no contracts, no explanations. Just deposits. Green stared down, her jaw locked. For the first time all morning, she wasn't yelling. She wasn't glaring. She was still. Jasmine's voice stayed calm, surgical. Each payment was routed through a shared financial manager connected to 4 other shell companies, 2 now under audit. Her tone sharpened. "None of this was in your committee financial statements. None of it was in your campaign filings. And none of it," she said, lifting her eyes, "was denied under oath because no one asked." The chamber held its breath. Even Green's lawyer, seated behind her, had leaned forward, one hand over his mouth, the other gripping a motionless pen. Now Jasmine continued, unfolding the last page. "Here's a signed engagement letter, an internal memo from one of the donor groups that made those payments. It mentions expedited legislative alignment post-vote." She placed it flat on the desk, the words clear to everyone. Green blinked twice, then turned away. Not at Jasmine, not at the screen, just away as if wishing the building itself would vanish. Jasmine didn't gloat, didn't smile. Her face stayed locked in the same steady calm she carried from the start. But now the air was different. The shouting was gone. The fight had drained. What filled the chamber wasn't triumph. It was weight, the kind that crushes denial before it even rises. The chairwoman didn't need the gavel. The room had already fallen under truth, under pressure, under something heavier than politics. And Green, her voice once a weapon, had vanished into silence. The hearing room stayed thick with smoke-like quiet. But outside, the noise erupted. Jasmine had dropped evidence inside, and now it was detonating across the internet. Within minutes, the clip hit Reddit raw, uncut, 37 minutes of congressional fire. Soon it was chopped into 15-second bursts, Jasmine sliding the photo under the camera. Green's eyes widening at the shell company's name. The moment she screamed "witch hunt" slowed down, bold subtitles flashing. On Telegram, anonymous accounts blasted freeze frames of the spa bill, the metadata tagged resort photo, and Green's stunned silence as G3 Consulting hit the screen. But what went viral wasn't just the evidence. It was Jasmine's voice, calm, precise, unforgiving. Her line, "No one's playing, this is your paperwork," was clipped, captioned, remixed, and looped everywhere online. A courtroom catchphrase turned viral firestorm. The hashtag data surgery started on political TikTok, but within hours it jumped everywhere. The folder hit Twitter's trending list by noon. By the end of the day, G3 Consulting was searched more than Taylor Swift on Google Trends. Dozens of accounts broke down every document Jasmine had revealed in the hearing. YouTubers who normally joked about politics stopped their routines to analyze screenshots of campaign finance records, corporate filings, and housing reform votes. Even creators who usually mock congressional hearings turned serious. One said on screen, holding up Green's FEC filing, "I don't care if you're red, blue, or purple. The money's real. The timeline's real. If this were anyone else, they'd already be in handcuffs." It wasn't just the left piling on. Conservative voices started going quiet or even agreeing. On a right-wing message board, one user wrote, "I wanted to dismiss this, but I checked the numbers myself." Damn, the Daily Ledger. A libertarian outlet usually hostile to oversight ran a headline, "When Facts Fight Back." The clip spread into Facebook, reaching older audiences, church groups, suburban networks that usually ignored hearings. One pastor in Indiana shared the video with the caption, "This is accountability. Doesn't matter who wears the pin." Then came the line that shook newsrooms. That night on Fox News, veteran correspondent Harold Miles looked straight into the camera. No script, no smirk. "I don't care who's right politically," he said, voice steady. "What I just watched was a data surgery." The panel fell silent. One voice whispered, "He's not wrong." Across the country, editors scrambled. Fact-checkers dug into every claim and found nothing to disprove. Every transaction Jasmine cited was public record. Every image had a timestamp. Every quote had context. No leaks, no rumors, just receipts. Meanwhile, Green's team went dark. No tweets, no press statements, no rebuttal clips. Journalists noticed her official site had disabled its press contact form. Rumors spread that 2 staffers had deleted personal accounts. In Times Square, a clip of Jasmine calmly opening her folder played on loop, not from ads, but synced by users, echoing the most watched congressional moment of the year. People weren't just watching. They were dissecting, sharing, translating. "In Vietnam, kung ai giang jua, jai lagiai tuquaba. Em Brasil, ninguém está brincando. Estes são seus documentos." An Instagram account called Osh the Folder Files hit 280,000 followers in under 48 hours. Memes exploded. One showed Jasmine as a surgeon with a scalpel labeled evidence and Green on the operating table labeled denial. Another set the hearing to a horror soundtrack cutting from Jasmine's line, "I have the receipts," to Green's shocked face before the screen went black. Even Saturday Night Live scrapped their planned cold open to parody the hearing, and instead of mocking Jasmine, they ended with her calmly facing the camera. Next question. This wasn't theater anymore. This was a reckoning delivered not with shouting, but with paperwork. while the nation replayed every second, pulled apart every file, and echoed Jasmine's calm voice. Marjorie Taylor Greene vanished, not in theory, in reality. For 10 days she disappeared. Her once-packed calendar, ribbon cuttings, town halls, TV slots went blank. Events were marked postponed or deleted outright. The press speculated regrouping legal strategy. But inside her circle, people admitted there was no plan, no strategy, just silence. Reporters camped outside her district office, waiting for a word, a wave, even a glare. The blinds stayed shut. The doors stayed locked. Donors couldn't reach her. Behind the scenes, the collapse spread slowly. First, interns drifted away. Then the speechwriter vanished from the group chat. Then senior aides. Phones stopped ringing. Emails bounced. Resignation letters floated around, though none were released. One leaked anyway, a farewell from her longtime communications director. "This isn't a campaign anymore. It's a wound." On a private party forum, a senior Republican posted at 2:11 a.m. "You can't save a ship when the captain won't open her eyes." It drew dozens of reactions, not comments, not likes, just silence. Everyone knew this wasn't strategy, it was surrender. On day 7, a photo leaked, grainy, snapped inside her office. It wasn't scandalous, it was chilling. Greene sat alone at her desk, lights off, shades half drawn, screen black, hands clasped in her lap, not working, not fighting, just waiting, not yelling, not plotting, just there. It looked like someone sitting inside the wreckage of a world that had collapsed while she still gripped the wheel. The image went viral within an hour, not because it shocked, but because it felt human. No press conference, no tweet, no excuse. She just stopped. People who once packed her rallies now whispered in comment threads. What happened to her rivals didn't gloat. There was nothing to mock. This wasn't defeat, it was darker. The woman who once shouted from podiums was now a photo behind glass, cut off from the machine she built. Then came the text. An old friend, not famous, just someone who knew her before politics reached out. The message was short. "Are you okay?" No emoji, no spin, just concern. MTG replied an hour later with one word. Quiet. Not fine, not fighting, just quiet. The kind of quiet you don't post about. The kind that falls when there's nothing left to defend. While the world argued over her silence, Jasmine Crockett did something more dangerous than speaking. She prepared. And when she came back, it wasn't to argue, it was to finish it. There were no cameras this time, no podium, no crowded gallery, no flashing lights, no cable hosts waiting for sound bites. Just polished floors, folded arms, and a room that felt like a courtroom after the verdict is already clear. No buzz, no tension building, only a heavy calm, the kind that comes before judgment. Jasmine Crockett walked in alone. No nod, no smile. She moved like a woman with nothing left to prove. A charcoal blazer sleeves rolled just enough to show notes scrawled faintly on her forearm. Her eyes clear, unreadable. In her hand, a thin black folder, no binders, no briefcase. Just one envelope that somehow felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. The committee sat waiting, the same members who had watched Greene unravel weeks earlier. But today they said nothing. No microphones leaned toward. No papers shuffled. No eyes lifted to meet hers. They knew this wasn't debate. This was judgment. She set the black folder down softly on the desk, the only sound paper brushing wood. "I won't be long," she said flatly. No one answered. She opened the folder with both hands, slow and deliberate, as if unsealing a confession. Inside were 3 documents. Just 3. But the air shifted as soon as they touched the table. The first, a revised campaign finance report filed 2 weeks after the housing reform vote. Jasmine's voice stayed steady, every word cutting sharper. "You'll see the difference," she said. The original filing listed consulting revenue at $92,000. The revision lists $36,400. She slid the page to the ethics chair. No amendment explanation, no audit, no memo. No correction note. She paused. The silence dared someone to speak. No one did. The second, a signed memorandum of understanding between G3 Consulting and a private donor firm, dated 3 days after Green's vote against housing protections. This lays out a verbal deal for faster influence over subcommittee scheduling, Jasmine explained. No minutes, no public record, but a signature. Her finger pressed on the corner of the page. It was there. Marjorie Taylor Greene's own signature, dated stamped under the title, Managing Partner G3 Consulting. Jasmine didn't need to add more, but she did. The memo wasn't filed with this committee. It wasn't disclosed. It wasn't in her conflict of interest form. No exemption requested, still no objections, no whispers, nothing. Then Jasmine pulled out the last item, a small silver USB drive. She turned to the monitor already set for her station, plugged it in. The screen blinked alive. "This is security camera footage," she said. Location, Holcomb Strategy Partners. Date, 3 days after the vote. Time 2:46 p.m. The first frame froze Green at a glass table pen, in hand a document in front of her. A congressman whispered, "Are you sure this is authentic?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. She simply turned the monitor toward them and pressed play. No narration, no commentary, just the video, 47 seconds. That was all. Green scanned the page, nodded to the man across from her, uncapped her pen, signed, and handed it back. They shook hands. No words, no sound, just the timestamp glowing perfectly aligned with the memo Jasmine had already placed on the table. The clip ended. The silence didn't. No microphones clicked. No papers rustled. One congresswoman stared at her shoes. A staffer shut his laptop quietly, not typing again. Jasmine waited, not to gloat, not to land a line. She simply waited, letting the silence settle like dust after a battle. Then she spoke calm and final. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. She unplugged the drive, tucked it back into the folder, and closed it. The snap of that folder shutting felt louder than anything said before. And then she stood. No applause, no music, no fanfare. Just Jasmine Crockett leaving the way she came, alone but steady. Behind her, the chamber sat frozen, a monument to one thing, only truth. The folder was shut, the room emptied. But Jasmine's last words, "Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen," didn't stay in the chamber. They spread. Quiet at first, then like thunder wrapped in silence. It began on a porch in rural Ohio. A man in his late 60s, a Marine veteran with a worn cap and hands shaped by war and factory shifts, sat in his truck. He wasn't crying, but he wasn't steady either. His grip on the wheel was tight. The clip he recorded lasted 40 seconds. No music, no hashtags, just him. "I voted for MTG," he said to the camera, "because I thought she was blunt. I thought she didn't play games. But now I'm asking, what's bluntness worth if there's no conscience behind it? No shouting, no likes begged for, just raw." And 12 hours later, it had 1.2 million views. In Atlanta, a 38-year-old woman sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand. She had once donated $200 to Green's campaign, the most she could give. Later, she lost her job without cause. She emailed Green's office 3 times. No reply, no follow-up, not even a form letter. For a while, she thought maybe she just wasn't important enough. Then came the hearing, the shell company, the silence. She posted on Facebook, "I lost my job because I was fired unfairly." I wrote her office 3 times. No reply. Now I understand why. The post didn't go viral, but in her small town, dozens of neighbors shared it. People who sat with her in church, moms she'd worked with at the school book drive. Folks who once praised MTG's fire were now asking each other, fire for what, for who? On TikTok, the edits spread quickly. Not flashy, just brutal. They were titled, "Before Jasmine, After Jasmine," split screen. On the left, clips of Marjorie Taylor Greene at rallies shouting about draining the swamp, fighting for the people, protecting American values. On the right, hearing footage, her hand trembling as she shouted, her silence as Jasmine read the payment dates. The instant her eyes locked on the black folder. The 30 seconds she sat speechless because she had no answer. The caption read, "What happens when you mistake loudness for virtue?" One clip hit 6 million views. Another had no sound at all. Just Green staring at the screen as Jasmine played the video of her signing the memo. The only text she knew, it was real. You could see it in her face. In a Pennsylvania high school civics class, a teacher in his 40s, serious but kind, paused the usual lecture on constitutional powers. Instead, he played Jasmine's final words. Then he told his class, "We're not studying politics today. We're studying the difference between power and responsibility." There was no quiz, no worksheet, just silence. Then a student in the back raised his hand. Why do people cheer someone right up until the moment they finally tell the truth? The teacher didn't reply. She didn't need to, because everyone already knew the real question wasn't about Green. It was about everyone else who stayed silent and why. Far from Washington, away from cameras, folders, and microphones, people began asking new questions. Not about parties, not about red versus blue, but about truth. At Detroit barbershops, the folder came up between football jokes. In Georgia, churches' sermons shifted. Pastors preached proverbs about integrity, not politics. At gas stations and dollar store lines on late-night buses, strangers talked about the hearing like it was more than politics. Like it was a mirror they couldn't look away from. A Nashville mechanic said it best to a customer waiting on an oil change. "Man, I don't even vote most years, but I watched that lady fold like a busted lawn chair, and that Jasmine girl never blinked. That wasn't politics. That was a reckoning." By the end of the week, silence spread like a shadow. Former MTG supporters quietly took yard signs down from garages. Most didn't say anything out loud, just turned inward, ashamed not of her loudness, but of how long they'd excused it. And the scariest part, it wasn't Jasmine that scared them. It was what she made them realize about themselves. The woman who shouted about corruption had signed the checks. The woman who called herself the voice of forgotten Americans had ignored every email without a donor's name attached. The silence that followed wasn't political anymore. It was personal. Because for the first time in a long time, people didn't just see a scandal. They saw themselves clapping for someone who never clapped back. The storm hadn't ended. It had only gone quiet. After Jasmine's thunderous reckoning inside the Capitol, the country didn't celebrate. No chants, no cheers, no fireworks of justice. Instead, something more dangerous than noise began focus. And focus brought consequences. The House Ethics Committee issued a statement so clear, so free of politics, it cut deeper than any ad or headline. After reviewing the documents presented during the hearing on X, we are initiating a preliminary investigation into possible ethical violations by Representative Green. No one applauded, no hashtags, no party outrage. But once that line hit the official House site, it became the most shared post on congressional servers that day. Not by bots, not by operatives, but by teachers, nurses, veterans, and conservative voters who never thought they'd click share on anything tied to ethics. People weren't reacting to Jasmine's politics. They were reacting to precision. And truth, when it's undeniable, doesn't need volume. It just needs light. In a small library in Ohio, folding chairs scraped across tile. No cameras, no moderator. Just 15 people and a printed stack of exhibits Jasmine had shown. An older man in a flannel jacket cleared his throat and said, "We're not reading this for drama. We're reading it because we weren't supposed to." They called it a document reading circle. One by one, they read out loud the financial disclosures, the missing entries, the blacked out donor trails, and worst of all, the reimbursements tied directly to bills Green had fought against. A woman in her 40s who once gave $75 to Green's campaign read a passage tracing a housing executive's donation to a shell company reappearing 3 weeks later as a consulting fee. She stopped mid-sentence, closed the folder, and whispered, "I wrote her letters. I asked for help when I was fired." Now I know why she never answered. These weren't pundits or politicians. They were the very people Jasmine had trusted not to take her side, but to read the evidence for themselves. Across states, the ripple spread into classrooms, kitchens, barbershops, and church basements. No shouting, no slogans, just people watching, listening, thinking. And that quiet, that stillness spoke louder than any protest. Green's allies in the House, once her loudest, most loyal defenders, went silent. One by one, they backed away without saying so. Reporters only got the same 4 words. No comment at this time. Some stopped appearing on panels. Others quietly unfollowed her on political sites. Emails went unanswered. Fundraisers canceled without notice. The cracks weren't whispers anymore. They were strategy. Journalists noticed first. One editor at a conservative paper admitted off record. It's not that they think she's guilty, it's that they think she's toxic now. Inside Green's own office, the collapse wasn't political, it was personal. One mid-level aide who had given years of work and loyalty scribbled a single line in a private journal. It was never meant for anyone else. But somehow, as these things do, it leaked a few days later. I tried to believe. But when the law starts moving, you realize faith can't stay blind forever. The line spread to Reddit, then X, and then headlines. It wasn't the words themselves that hit people. It was the raw honesty, no blame, no spin, just the same realization. Thousands of others were now facing the truth, had always been there. Jasmine just switched on the light, and still Jasmine didn't gloat. No press conferences, no cryptic victory posts, no interviews. While networks debated and clips flooded the internet, Jasmine simply went home to her district. Quiet, steady, unshaken. Meanwhile, the internet turned facts into a movement. Across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Telegram, a trend called Jasmine versus the noise spread like wildfire. Split screens showed MTG shouting about witch hunts or Christian values on one side, and Jasmine's calm voice, her exhibits, her evidence on the other. No captions, no hashtags, just the contrast. One former supporter wrote on Facebook, "I voted for her because she didn't play games. But now I see she was the game." The tide didn't shift with rage, it shifted with fatigue. People weren't just angry that Green had made mistakes. They were crushed that she made them and then lied about it. When reporters pressed Green for comment, they got silence, or a vague line about legal review pending. But everyone knew people don't go quiet unless they've got something to hide. And back in that Ohio library under humming fluorescent lights, the same elderly man who had first read aloud from Jasmine's exhibits looked up and said, "This isn't about Democrats or Republicans anymore. This is about who we allow to speak for us." No one replied, but every head nodded. The nation had spoken, and now America waited not for speeches, not for headlines, but to see what courage looked like when every spotlight had faded. Jasmine Crockett didn't ride the wave. She turned down every request for interviews from cable news to glossy magazines. No book deals, no cover stories. Instead, she posted one short note on her own website. No frills, no spin. Just plain words, "I'm not here to tear anyone down. I just want people to look up and see who's standing for them." That line, quiet, steady human, reached farther than any late-night segment. It spread like a stone tossed into still water. Days later in Fort Worth, Texas, a father brought his 12-year-old daughter to library story hour. Jasmine's words played on the projector in the background. The girl tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Dad, is that lady a superhero?" Without hesitation, he answered, "No, but she's as brave as one." The girl nodded, eyes wide, as the projector hummed in the silence. Across town in a high school civics class, the same phrase echoed again. "Truth doesn't need to shout." The teacher paused the clip and looked at her students. Silence filled the room, heavy, thoughtful. Then a voice from the back said quietly, "So telling the truth can be quiet but still powerful." The teacher didn't correct her. She just nodded. The lesson was already learned. Jasmine didn't speak again that week. No rallies, no speeches, just one email to her staff. Don't let them forget what quiet looks like. It wasn't political, it was personal. She understood now the strongest sound isn't noise, it's certainty. And people reflected that quiet certainty in small human ways. In Indiana, a retired postal worker printed Jasmine's words and taped them above his workbench. Sorting mail, he would pause, glance at the note, and keep going. In rural North Carolina, a grandmother read Jasmine's line at her quilting circle. "I'm not here to tear anyone down," she recited while the women stitched in rhythm, each pull of thread a quiet sign of solidarity. On parenting forums, a viral post showed a handwritten copy of Jasmine's quote taped to a fridge. A teenage son asked, "Mom, did she say that for me?" She replied, "Yes." There were no rallies, no banners, no chants, just quiet reflection spreading across kitchens, shops, and schools. A realization courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a single sentence, a steady gaze, and the resolve to stand for what's right, even when no one's watching. And in Congress, Jasmine's post stirred something unusual reflection. Lawmakers who usually race to tweet or spar on TV were instead emailing aides with the subject line, "Quiet strength." Behind closed doors, they admitted how easily truth gets buried under noise, and how rare it was for someone to simply stand and say, "Here it is." One aide who had followed Jasmine's career quietly messaged a friend in another office. Watching her walk away like that, no fanfare, no interview, hit me harder than any speech. She didn't need the stage anymore. By the weekend, the line "Look up and see who's standing for you" began appearing on bookmarks, journals, even tattoos. Not as a slogan, but as a reminder. Real representation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply someone showing up and saying, "I'm here for you." And beyond politics, that quiet started connecting people. In a prison library, an inmate listened to Jasmine's post on the shared tablet. He copied the words onto scraps of graham cracker boxes and lined them above his bunk so he could see them every morning. It was quiet. It was deep. It didn't need headlines or breaking news alerts, because it had already sunk into the skin of a nation, learning something harder than politics. Strength, when carried in silence, lasts longer than any speech. And while America echoed with Jasmine's quiet truth, something else began to fade. Something once loud, sharp, and relentless. It didn't end with a crash. It slipped away the way shame usually does in silence. MTG was simply gone. No farewell statement, no cameras outside her house, no polished exit post with a flag emoji and bold signature. Her DC office was the first sign. The lights were off by morning. Staffers never came in. The flag outside still flew, but the spirit behind it felt hollow. Her official voicemail was replaced by a flat automated message. "This office is no longer accepting contact requests." Every email bounced back with the same sentence. "This account has been deactivated." Reporters arrived for press conferences that no longer existed. Event signs were taken down before they could be put up. On the calendar where a rally had once been circled in red, there was nothing but a blank square. Empty like the hallways where her staff once stood with clipped badges and cautious smiles. No one entered. No one left. The door stayed shut. When a voice that once filled headlines suddenly disappears, people notice. But they don't shout. They whisper. They wonder. That night, far from Capitol Hill, the loudest moment in the country came in the form of stillness. In a modest apartment just outside Fort Worth, Jasmine Crockett sat at her kitchen table. No cameras, no lights, no headlines scrolling. Just her worn leather bag on the chair beside her, the same one she carried into the hearing weeks ago. Inside was the folder that had been her armor, her map, her fire. But tonight she didn't open it. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, the weight it carried wasn't hers alone. Across the table sat a plate of food gone cold. The fork rested on a folded napkin. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, but time felt irrelevant. Jasmine leaned back, breathed not from exhaustion but from release. Her eyes drifted from the bag to the window, where amber streetlight filtered through. No chants outside, no cheering crowds, just crickets and the slow breath of a city at rest. She smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but real. The kind of smile that only comes when the fight is over and the ground beneath you finally feels solid. She whispered almost to herself. They read it, not shouted, not declared, just admitted. They actually read it, because that was the real victory. Not the silence from MTG's camp, not the polls shifting, not even the ethics committee's statement. It was that the country finally had read what she carried, not skimmed, not ignored. Read all the names, all the numbers. Every quiet betrayal of trust, of power, of public money had been seen, not by headlines but by people, fathers, teachers, truck drivers, a kid in civics class, an elderly couple in Ohio, a nurse in Mississippi. The America that too often looked away had finally stared back. Jasmine lifted a glass of water, took a sip, and held it in her hands. The silence wasn't lonely, it was sacred. She thought of the words that wouldn't leave her mind. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I just want people to look up and see who's standing for them. That line no longer belonged to her. It belonged to whoever needed it next. She glanced at her phone, 14 missed calls, 23 unread messages, most from reporters. She set it face down. Not tonight. This night wasn't for answers. It was for stillness. Truth didn't always need to move forward. Sometimes it needed to rest. Down the hall, her cat leapt onto the windowsill and curled into a ball. Jasmine watched and exhaled softly. That small, peaceful image steadied her more than any headline ever could. She thought about Green not as an opponent, not even as a symbol, but as a person. She wondered if she was okay. She didn't pity her. She didn't hate her. She just understood. Because silence, when it comes after noise, can be a kind of truth, too. A final one. And somewhere in some office, a congressional page probably flipped over Green's nameplate. The staff email chain was likely erased. The printer no longer hummed after midnight. And someone, maybe a janitor, switched off the last desk lamp and locked the door. But Jasmine's light stayed on. Not because she wanted attention, but because she knew that somewhere a new file was being opened. A new woman, maybe younger, maybe quieter, maybe louder, would pick it up. And she deserved to find a world more awake than before. She sat in the silence a little longer, listening not with her ears but with her breath, her memory, her scars. Every case she had carried, every woman ignored, every document filed and forgotten, and now all of it finally seen. The folder beside her stayed shut, but inside every word had already been read by the only jury that mattered, the people. She rose, slowly stretched, and walked to the window. Fort Worth lay quiet. Porch lights glowed across the streets. A siren wailed in the distance, not urgent, just part of the night. Then she whispered into the dark, "It's not over, but at least now they see." She didn't have to explain who they were or what it meant. Truth had legs. It would walk on its own now. And somewhere in America, a little girl told her mother, "I want to be brave like her." And a father sipped coffee while reading the ethics committee's report. And a young staffer wondered if she'd have the courage to stand up next time too. Jasmine didn't know them all, but she had struck the match. And tonight, even in silence, America was glowing. And in that silence, under Fort Worth's porch lights and behind Capitol Hill's closed doors, a different kind of sound began to rise. Not noise, not outrage. Realization. A quiet awakening, steady and unstoppable. The story of Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't just politics. It was about something older than any constitution, deeper than any headline accountability. Not the kind that just ends careers, but the kind that stirs nations awake. Because when one person stands in truth, others are forced to listen, not always with applause, but with reflection. Who's really representing me? The question spread not in anger, but in clarity. And clarity traveled. From classrooms to courtrooms, from bus stops to barbershops. Not everyone agreed, but they cared. And sometimes caring is more powerful than agreement. In a world that moves fast, where outrage trends and truth gets buried under algorithms, Jasmine reminded people that integrity isn't loud, but it lasts. Her refusal to chase fame to profit, to celebrate another's downfall, that was the real revolution. She didn't fight to be a hero. She fought so people could see for themselves. The child in the classroom, the father at the kitchen table, the neighbor finally reading the fine print. Because real change doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with seeing. And for the first time in a long time, America didn't just look. It looked up. The days after Jasmine's whisper in the window carried a strange stillness across America. It wasn't the silence of apathy. It was the silence of focus, of people finally realizing they had been watching noise for years and mistaking it for leadership. In small towns, conversations began not with, "Did you see the news?" but with, "Did you read it?" That single verb carried more force than any trending slogan. People weren't repeating sound bites anymore. They were passing around printed copies of documents, articles, and exhibits. They were sitting down in pairs or small groups and reading. One farmer in Iowa took a stack of printouts from Jasmine's exhibits into the grain elevator office. He set them down between two neighbors and said simply, "We're going to go through this, line by line." The men weren't activists, they weren't party leaders. They were ordinary people with mud on their boots and calluses on their hands. And yet for 3 hours they sat and traced numbers on a page, shaking their heads, not with outrage, but with clarity. In a Cleveland laundromat, a woman taped Jasmine's words to the wall above the change machine. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. By the next week, 5 more notes had been added by strangers. Some were prayers, some were fragments of anger. Others were apologies written to themselves, to their children, to their communities. The silence spread not as absence, but as discipline. Inside Congress, the shift was undeniable. Lawmakers who had once rushed to cameras to deliver sharp lines suddenly hesitated. Journalists noticed gaps in the usual cycle. Where once Green's allies would have filled a news block with aggressive counterpunches, there was only absence. Behind closed doors, aides whispered about the Jasmine effect. A memo circulated quietly through both parties' internal channels: expect heightened scrutiny, assume receipts will surface, prepare accordingly. It wasn't a warning about Jasmine specifically. It was a warning about the culture she had forced into the open. A junior congressman from the Midwest, usually brash in committee hearings, asked his staff to review every financial disclosure he had ever filed. Not because anyone had accused him of wrongdoing, but because, as he told a colleague, "I don't want to be the next folder." Lobbyists felt it too. One Washington strategist admitted in a private dinner, she didn't just take down Green, she changed the temperature. Everyone feels like they're walking around with glass walls now. Contracts were suddenly delayed. Donor dinners grew tense. The air of invincibility that had long surrounded certain names began to fracture, and still Jasmine said nothing. Back in Fort Worth, she walked through her district like she always had no entourage, no security detail beyond the minimum. People recognized her, but they didn't mob her. They approached her with the same quiet they had watched her model. A school teacher stopped her outside a grocery store clutching a basket of apples. "I showed your clip to my class," she said softly. "Not because of politics, because they needed to see what patience looks like when it's armed with facts." Jasmine nodded, thanked her, and kept walking. At a bus stop, an older man in a veteran's cap took off his glasses and said, "Ma'am, I didn't vote for you, but I watched you that day. You weren't playing. You were working. That's all I ever wanted out of them. Just work." He shook her hand once firmly, then sat back down on the bench. Stories like these stacked up like bricks in an invisible wall, not built to protect Jasmine, but to hold up something larger: trust. Not blind trust in a politician, but trust that documents could mean more than slogans, that receipts could matter more than rants. What Jasmine didn't expect, what no one expected, was how far the story traveled. In London, a BBC panel compared her to past whistleblowers, noting that she wasn't a leaker but a confirmer. She didn't reveal secrets. She revealed what was already public but ignored. In Nairobi, a civil society group held a truth circle modeled after the reading groups popping up in the U.S. They projected Jasmine's final line: "Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen onto the side of a community center." In São Paulo, a student activist scrawled the words on a banner during a local protest against housing corruption. The phrase wasn't translated. It didn't need to be. People understood. Suddenly, Jasmine Crockett was not just an American name. She was a case study, a lesson plan, a proof point that democracy, fragile as it was, could still sharpen itself if someone dared to lay out the paper trail. And still, Jasmine refused interviews. She didn't travel abroad. She didn't accept honorary titles or speaking fees. When a European university offered her $50,000 to give a keynote, she replied with a 2-word email: respectfully, no. Meanwhile, Green's absence grew heavier by the day. Her silence no longer looked strategic. It looked like surrender. One political cartoon showed a massive black folder sitting in a congressional chair with the caption, "Present." The seat labeled Green sat empty beside it. The image went viral not because it mocked her, but because it captured the new truth. The folder spoke louder than she did. And yet Jasmine didn't celebrate. She attended a town hall in Fort Worth, fielded questions about school funding, potholes, and local zoning disputes. She answered each one with the same steady tone she had used in the hearing. No grandstanding, no theatrics. Just the work. Her staff noticed it too. One aide wrote in their private notes, She's not running on adrenaline anymore. She's running on gravity. She knows the ground has shifted and she's just steady. The ripple wasn't measured in headlines now. It was measured in human stories. A teenager in Arizona started a TikTok series called Read With Me the Folder Files. She sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, hair in a messy bun, reading sections of Jasmine's evidence aloud. Her videos weren't edited. She stumbled on words. But each clip got thousands of views. Kids in the comments wrote, "I never cared about hearings, but this hits different." In Wisconsin, a retired nurse printed Jasmine's website post and taped it to the door of her community center. Visitors signed their names under it like a pledge. Not to Jasmine, but to the idea that truth could be quiet and still matter. At a coffee shop in Oregon, baristas began writing Jasmine's line, "Look up and see who's standing for you on the sleeves of paper cups." Customers snapped photos and shared them online. It wasn't marketing, it was memory. Through it all, Jasmine carried her own silence carefully. In quiet moments, she wondered if she had done enough. The folder was closed, yes. The evidence had been seen. But the system she had confronted was still alive, still churning, still capable of bearing truth under noise. One night as she walked her neighborhood under the dim streetlights, she thought about all the women whose names had never made it into a folder. Women silenced by bureaucracy, by poverty, by power. She thought about how many stories would never reach the microphone, and she understood her fight wasn't about one scandal or one rival. It was about reminding people that silence could be broken, not by shouting, but by persistence. Weeks later, when she walked back into the Capitol, there was no media swarm, no chants, no protests, just the echo of her own footsteps down the hall. But aides noticed the way other lawmakers shifted in their seats when she passed. Not fear, not admiration, something deeper, a recognition that she had changed the rules. In one committee, hearing a senior congressman lean toward her microphone and ask for clarification on a minor budget item. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't political, it was careful, deliberate. The tone of someone who understood that if a folder ever landed on their desk, they had better be prepared. The most powerful change wasn't on C-SPAN, it was at kitchen tables. In rural Arkansas, a family gathered after dinner. Instead of turning on the TV, the father pulled out a stack of papers, campaign filings from their local representative. He looked at his kids and said, "We're going to read this together." In California, a group of college students formed a club called Receipts Matter. They didn't organize protests. They organized reading nights, fact-check circles, and voter registration drives. In New Hampshire, a librarian created a display titled "Documents That Changed Us" and placed Jasmine's printed exhibits next to historical texts. The placard underneath read, "Truth doesn't fade, it waits." Back in Fort Worth, Jasmine sat on her porch one evening as the sun sank low. Her neighbors waved. Children biked past, their laughter ringing into the warm air. She leaned back in her chair holding a mug of tea and thought about the journey. She hadn't set out to be a symbol. She hadn't wanted to be a movement. She had only wanted the truth to be read, and now it had been. The folder remained closed on her desk inside, but its contents lived in thousands of homes, schools, churches, and circles across the country. It had become bigger than her. She smiled not with pride, but with relief, and she whispered again, as if to confirm it to herself, "They read it." This time she didn't mean just the documents. She meant the message, the lesson, the shift. And as the night deepened over Fort Worth, America glowed with something rare, not outrage, not noise, but recognition. Because sometimes the loudest revolutions don't roar. They read, they see, they change. And Jasmine Crockett, walking quietly, steadily away from the spotlight, had lit that path. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything, like subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.